The day Emily Carter walked into her family's living room wearing a simple black dress, her mother looked at her and said, "You don't belong here anymore." Emily didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply placed a small envelope on the table and walked out. 3 years later, that same family stood in the lobby of a company worth more than $80 million. Their business was collapsing. Their home was about to be taken. Their entire future depended on one mysterious investor. And when the investor finally walked into the room, Emily's mother nearly fainted. Because the woman who had come to save their family was the daughter they had once called a failure. Before we continue, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss our next emotional family story. Now, let's continue with Emily's journey because the truth her family was about to discover would change everything. Emily Carter was 32 years old and lived in a small apartment on the edge of Chicago. Her apartment was modest. The kitchen was tiny. The furniture was old, and her car had more than 200,000 miles on it. But Emily had something most people never saw: a dream. For years, she had been quietly building a company from nothing. It started with a simple idea. Small businesses across America struggled to sell online. They had great products. They had hardworking owners. They didn't understand technology, marketing, websites, or digital sales. Emily understood all of it. She had spent years studying business, technology, marketing, and customer behavior. During the day, she worked long hours. At night, she built her company. For 2 years, she worked alone. She answered emails at midnight. She designed websites at 3 in the morning. She handled customer complaints while eating instant noodles. And when her first client paid her $2,000, Emily cried, not because of the money, because for the first time, someone believed her idea had value. But her family never did. Especially her mother, Margaret. Margaret had always compared Emily to her older sister, Jessica. Jessica was beautiful, popular, successful, and married to a wealthy real estate developer named Daniel. At every family dinner, Margaret praised Jessica. Jessica just bought another investment property. Jessica is going to be on the cover of a local business magazine. Jessica and Daniel are building something important. Then Margaret would look at Emily. "And what are you doing?" Emily would smile. "I'm building a business." Margaret would laugh. "A business? Yes. Doing what?" "Helping small businesses grow online." Jessica would roll her eyes. Daniel would smile politely, and Margaret would shake her head. "You always have these strange dreams, Emily." Emily never argued. She had learned that some people only believed in success after they could see the money. One Friday evening, Margaret invited the entire family to dinner. Emily arrived late. Not because she was careless, because one of her biggest clients had just signed a contract. She had spent the entire afternoon on a video call. When she finally reached her mother's house, she was exhausted. She wore a simple black sweater and jeans. Jessica was already sitting at the table in an expensive dress. Daniel was beside her. Margaret looked at Emily. "You're late." "I'm sorry, Mom. I was working," Jessica laughed. "Still working on that little online project?" Emily placed her coat on a chair. "It's becoming more than a project." "Oh, really?" Jessica asked. Emily smiled. "My company is growing." Daniel leaned back. "How much revenue?" Emily hesitated. She had never told them the truth, not because she wanted to hide her success, because she wanted to be loved before she became successful. "I'm doing well," Emily said. Jessica smiled. "That's not a number." Margaret served the food. "Emily, you should be more realistic." "I am realistic. You've been saying you're building a company for years. And I am. You live in a tiny apartment. I'm reinvesting everything." Jessica laughed. "Reinvesting what? Your paycheck?" Emily looked at her sister. "Why does that bother you?" The table became silent. Margaret immediately became angry. "Don't speak to your sister like that." "I'm not. You always make everything difficult." Emily stared at her mother. "Everything difficult?" "Yes." Margaret placed her fork down. "You are 32 years old. You have no husband, no children, no house, and no stable career." Emily's heart tightened. "I have a company." "You have a fantasy." Jessica looked down at her plate. Daniel said nothing. Margaret continued. "You need to stop pretending you are some successful businesswoman." Emily felt something inside her break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a thread finally snapping. She looked around the table. The family she had spent her entire life trying to impress, the people she had helped financially, the people she had secretly supported. the people who had no idea that Emily had paid for Margaret's medical bills 2 years earlier, the people who didn't know Emily had secretly helped Daniel when his first business failed, the people who believed she was a failure. Emily stood up. Margaret looked at her. "Where are you going?" "Home. We haven't finished dinner." "I'm finished." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go again." Emily looked at her sister. "No," Jessica stopped. Emily took a deep breath. "This time there won't be another argument." Margaret frowned. "What does that mean?" Emily picked up her coat. "It means I'm done trying to prove myself to people who decided I was a failure before I ever had a chance." Margaret stared at her. Then she said the words Emily would never forget. "Maybe you were never meant to be part of this family." Emily stood frozen. The room went silent. Even Jessica looked uncomfortable. Emily slowly nodded. Then she walked out. She didn't cry until she reached her car, and when the tears finally came, she couldn't stop them. That night, Emily returned to her apartment. She sat on the floor. Her laptop was still open. The company dashboard showed numbers that would have shocked her family. Her company had generated more than $4 million in revenue that year. She owned 82% of it, but Emily didn't feel rich. She felt empty. She had spent her entire life believing that one day, if she became successful enough, her family would finally look at her differently. Now she realized something painful. She had been trying to win a game they never intended to let her win. Emily opened her phone. There were dozens of messages from her mother. "Don't be dramatic. Come back tomorrow. You embarrass me." Emily stared at the messages. Then she opened her banking app. For years, she had quietly transferred money to her mother. Medical bills, mortgage payments, utility bills, emergency expenses. She had never told anyone. She had never wanted praise. She simply wanted her mother to be okay. Emily looked at the screen. Then she removed the automatic payments. For the first time in years, she chose herself. Over the next year, Emily's company exploded. Her platform helped small businesses build online stores, manage marketing, and reach customers across the country. A bakery in Ohio became nationally known. A family-owned furniture business in Michigan doubled its sales. A small clothing brand run by two sisters in Texas became a major online retailer. Emily's company grew because she understood something powerful. Small businesses didn't need complicated technology. They needed someone to believe in them, and Emily knew exactly what it felt like to be underestimated. She hired employees, then more employees. She moved into a real office, then a bigger office. Investors began calling. One investor offered her $10 million. Another offered $20 million. Emily refused both. She didn't want to lose control. She remembered what it felt like when other people told her what she was worth, so she built carefully, slowly. Her company became one of the fastest-growing technology businesses in the country. Magazines began writing about her. Emily Carter, the woman who built a business from her apartment, from instant noodles to millions. The quiet entrepreneur helping America's small businesses. But Emily never celebrated loudly. Every success reminded her of one thing her family still didn't know. Meanwhile, Jessica and Daniel's life began to fall apart. Their real estate business had grown too quickly. They had borrowed millions of dollars. They had purchased expensive properties. They had trusted the market would continue rising. But when the economy changed, everything collapsed. One project failed, then another. The bank demanded payment. Investors wanted their money back. Daniel began selling properties. Jessica sold her jewelry, then her car, then their vacation home. Margaret knew nothing about the details. Daniel kept saying, "We'll recover." But deep inside, he knew the truth. They were drowning. One evening, Emily's mother called her. Emily stared at the phone. For a moment, she almost didn't answer. Then she did. "Hello?" Margaret's voice was weak. "Emily?" "Yes." "Are you busy?" Emily looked at her laptop. "Yes." Oh, there was silence. Then Margaret said, "I need to talk to you." Emily closed her laptop. "What happened?" "I'm fine, Mom." Margaret began crying. Emily's heart immediately tightened. "What's wrong?" Margaret finally said. "The bank is taking the house." Emily sat silently. "What?" "Your sister and Daniel have financial problems." "How bad?" Margaret didn't answer. "Mom, how bad?" "Very bad." Emily closed her eyes. She had spent years trying to escape the family's problems. But when she heard her mother crying, she still wanted to help. That was the problem with loving people. Sometimes they could hurt you deeply, and you still cared about them. A week later, Emily went to see her family. The house looked different. The expensive decorations were gone. The beautiful furniture had been sold. The walls were empty. Jessica sat on the couch. She looked tired. Daniel was pacing across the room. Margaret sat quietly. When Emily entered, no one spoke. Finally, Jessica said, "You came." Emily nodded. "What happened?" Daniel sat down. "Our company needs a financial partner." "How much?" Jessica looked at her. $10 million. Emily remained silent. $10 million. For most people, it was impossible. For Emily, it was possible. But that wasn't the real question. The real question was whether she should help. Daniel looked at her. "We have investors interested." "Then why are you asking me?" Jessica answered. "Because we need someone who understands technology." Emily almost laughed. A year earlier, they had called her company a fantasy. Now they needed her knowledge. "What do you want from me?" Daniel said, "A loan." "How much?" $10 million. Emily looked at Jessica. "Do you know how much my company is worth?" Jessica hesitated. "No." Emily nodded. "Of course you don't." Margaret looked at her. Emily stood up. "I need time." Jessica suddenly became angry. "We are family." Emily looked at her. "Were we?" Jessica froze. The words hung in the air. Emily immediately regretted saying them, but she couldn't take them back. 3 days later, Jessica received a phone call. It was from a business consultant. The consultant had been hired to find an investor. He said, "I may have found the perfect partner." Jessica was excited. "Who?" "Carter Digital Ventures." Jessica searched the name online. Her face changed. The company was everywhere. Millions of users. Thousands of business clients. Major investors. National recognition. The founder was Emily Carter. Jessica stared at the screen. "No," the consultant continued. "She built the company from nothing." Jessica couldn't breathe. "What did you say?" "Emily Carter, founder and CEO." Jessica slowly stood up. The room began spinning. She opened a business article. There was Emily, standing in front of a huge office building, wearing a simple black dress. The headline read, "Emily Carter's company reaches $80 million valuation." Jessica read it again, then again. Her hands began shaking. She called Daniel. "Come here." "What happened?" "Come here now." When Daniel arrived, Jessica turned the laptop toward him. He stared at the screen. His face went pale. "Is that yes?" "Emily?" Jessica nodded. They looked at each other. The daughter they had mocked, the sister they had ignored, the woman they had called a failure, was worth more than their entire business. Jessica immediately called Emily. Emily answered. "Hello, Emily?" "Yes, we need to talk." "About what?" Jessica struggled to speak. "Your company." Emily became silent. "What about it?" "Why didn't you tell us?" Emily laughed softly. "You never asked." "That's not fair." Emily's voice became quiet. "No, Jessica, what wasn't fair was you laughing at me every time I said I was building something." Jessica began crying. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know?" "That's not true." "Then why did you believe I was a failure?" Jessica had no answer. Emily continued. "Do you know what hurts the most?" "What?" "I didn't need you to believe I would become wealthy." Jessica said nothing. "I needed you to believe I was trying." That sentence destroyed Jessica, because she suddenly remembered everything. Every family dinner, every joke, every time Emily had arrived tired, every time Emily had refused to buy expensive clothes, every time Jessica had assumed Emily was struggling, and she remembered something else. 3 years earlier, when Daniel's first business was failing, someone had anonymously paid a large debt. Jessica had never known who. Daniel had always assumed it was a business partner, but now Jessica realized the truth. "Emily, yes." "Was it you?" Emily didn't answer. Jessica began crying harder. "You paid Daniel's debt, didn't you?" Silence. "Emily?" Finally, Emily said, "It was a long time ago." Jessica covered her mouth. "You saved us." "I helped." "You saved us." Emily closed her eyes. "I didn't do it so you would owe me." "Then why?" Emily's voice broke. "Because you were my family." Emily had two choices. She could walk away. She could let the business collapse. She could say, "You made your choice." And nobody could blame her, or she could help. But this time, she would not save them without conditions. Emily met with Daniel. She reviewed the company. The problems were serious. But the business could survive. It needed restructuring, new leadership, better technology, and honesty. Emily made an offer. "I will invest." Daniel looked relieved. "But," Emily continued, "I will not give you money to continue doing what failed." Daniel nodded. "What do you want?" "Transparency." "Of course." "Professional management." "Yes, and I want ownership." Daniel looked surprised. How much? 49%. Jessica looked at him. Daniel understood. Emily was not taking advantage of them. She was protecting the investment. He agreed. The deal was signed. Emily saved the company, but she did not return to the family as the little sister who needed approval. She returned as a businesswoman, a partner, an equal, and slowly something began to change. Margaret was the hardest relationship. For months, she barely spoke to Emily. Not because she was angry, because she was ashamed. One afternoon, Emily visited her mother. Margaret was sitting in the backyard, the same backyard where Emily had once played as a child. Emily sat beside her. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Margaret said, "I was a terrible mother." Emily looked at her. "Mom, no." Margaret shook her head. "Let me say it." Emily remained silent. Margaret continued, "I spent your entire life comparing you to your sister." Emily looked down. "I thought I was motivating you. You hurt me." "I know." Margaret began crying. "I thought Jessica was successful because she looked successful." Emily said nothing. "And you were quiet. You didn't show me anything. You never told me what you were building." "You never asked." Margaret nodded. "I know." Emily felt tears forming in her eyes. Margaret reached for her hand. "I called you a failure." Emily looked at her. "Yes. I told you that you didn't belong in this family." "Yes," Margaret cried. "I don't know how to take those words back." Emily looked at her mother for a long time, then she said, "You can't." Margaret lowered her head. "But you can do something else." "What?" "You can stop saying them." Margaret looked up. Emily squeezed her hand. "I don't need you to pretend the past didn't happen." Margaret cried silently. "I need you to accept that it did." Emily leaned closer. "And I need you to love me as Emily." Margaret stared at her, not as a successful CEO, not as a woman with money, not as the daughter who saved the family. Just me. Margaret wrapped her arms around Emily, and for the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to be held by her mother. Jessica's apology took longer. She was not naturally emotional. She had spent her entire life hiding insecurity behind confidence. One evening, she visited Emily's office. Emily was working late. Jessica stood in the doorway. "Can I come in?" Emily looked up. "Sure." Jessica walked inside. She looked around. The office was beautiful. Hundreds of employees worked in different departments. The company had grown into something enormous. Jessica looked at Emily. "Do you ever get tired?" Emily smiled. "Every day." "Why do you keep going?" Emily thought for a moment. "Because I know what it feels like to have no one believe in you." Jessica looked down. "I'm sorry." Emily nodded. "I know." "No, I mean it." Jessica sat down. "I was jealous of you." Emily was surprised. "Of me?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because you didn't need everyone to like you." Emily laughed softly. "I spent my entire life trying to make people like me." "I know." Jessica looked at her. "But you eventually stopped." Emily became quiet. Jessica continued. "I always thought I was the successful one." "You were successful." "No." Jessica shook her head. "I had money, I had clothes, I had a house." She looked at Emily. "But I was terrified that if I stopped looking successful, everyone would discover I wasn't." Emily stared at her. Jessica began crying. "You were actually building something." Emily moved closer. Jessica said, "I destroyed the one relationship that should have mattered most." Emily sat beside her. "You didn't destroy it." Jessica looked up. "Then what?" "It changed." "Can it go back to the way it was?" Emily shook her head. "No." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "Why?" "Because we're not the same people anymore." Jessica nodded slowly. Emily continued, "But maybe we can build something better." Jessica hugged her, and this time Emily hugged her back. Over the next 2 years, Emily transformed Daniel's failing company. She introduced technology, modernized the business, created new systems, and gave employees a voice. Daniel stayed involved, but he learned to listen. Jessica became involved in the charitable foundation Emily created. The foundation helped struggling women start small businesses. Margaret became the person Emily had always wanted her to be, not perfect, but present. She attended Emily's events. She celebrated her achievements. And sometimes, when Emily was tired, Margaret simply called and said, "Have you eaten?" Those simple words meant more to Emily than any award, because after all those years, she finally understood. Love was not always about grand speeches. Sometimes it was a mother asking whether her daughter had eaten. 3 years after Emily walked out of that family dinner, she stood on a stage in front of thousands of people. Her company had become one of the most successful technology platforms in the country. The event was being streamed across America. Emily was receiving an award for entrepreneurship. Her family sat in the front row. Margaret, Jessica, Daniel. Emily looked at them. Then she looked at the audience. She began speaking. When I was younger, I believed success meant proving people wrong. The room became silent. I thought if I became rich enough, successful enough, powerful enough, then the people who doubted me would finally understand my value. She paused. But I was wrong. Margaret began crying. Emily continued. Success is not making the people who rejected you regret their decision. Success is becoming the person you were always capable of becoming, even when nobody is watching. The audience applauded. Emily looked at her mother. And sometimes, success is not walking away forever. Margaret covered her face. Sometimes, success is finding the strength to forgive. The room became silent again, but forgiveness does not mean pretending the pain never happened. It means refusing to let the pain control the rest of your life. Emily smiled. I was once told I didn't belong in my own family. Her mother cried openly now. But today, I know something. Emily looked toward her family. I never needed permission to belong. The audience stood. The applause lasted for almost a minute. Emily stepped off the stage. Her mother stood waiting. Margaret wrapped her arms around her. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Emily closed her eyes. For years, she had dreamed of hearing those words, but now that she finally heard them, she realized something. The words were beautiful, but they were no longer necessary, because Emily had finally become proud of herself. Years later, Emily returned to the small apartment where she had started her company. The apartment was empty now, the walls were old. The kitchen was tiny, but Emily smiled. She remembered the nights she had cried there, the failures, the rejection, the loneliness, the fear. She remembered the first $2,000 payment, the first employee, the first major contract, the day her family discovered the truth, and she remembered the moment she finally stopped trying to prove herself. Her mother stood beside her. Why did you want to come back here? Emily looked around. Because this is where I learned something. What? Emily smiled. But I'll never forget what happened. Margaret nodded. I don't want you to. Emily took her mother's hand. Good. They walked outside together. Emily looked at the old apartment one last time. She had once believed that success meant escaping the place where she had been rejected. Now she understood. Success was not escaping her past. It was becoming strong enough to look back at it without letting it define her. And the girl who had once been called a failure had built a company worth millions, had saved the family that had rejected her, had forgiven the people who had hurt her. But most importantly, she had finally learned that her value had never depended on anyone else's approval. Because sometimes, the person your family underestimates becomes the person who changes the entire family's future.